Good evening, this is the Romany Rye. My name's Clarence Frederick Ware. Now, you're going to have to bear with me, people, because trying to edit videos and cut bits out and put bits in, I haven't learnt the art of that yet, so sometimes I might backtrack on myself a little bit or whatever, but I'll do my best. Now, some people won't like what I'm going to say, but I'm going to share a lifetime of experiences with you all, and how I struggled in the beginning. It's very difficult. Lost both my parents very early. Anyway, I was born on July the 22nd, 1960. My mother's name was Harriet Richards, daughter of Fred and Louis Richards, and my father's name was Brian Thomas Henry Ware, eldest son of Clarence and Annie Ware. Basically, from the Ware side of things, which I'll start with, my grandfather Clarence Ware's family were showmen. I've got some reference to them being hat makers in London, general dealers in London. Anyway, after the war, my grandfather, he lived in Plymouth. He decided to be a general dealer, so he bought and sold anything that he could make a pound on. So, from the Ware side of things, my grandfather would travel down from Plymouth to the West Country, Newquay, Penzance, Redruth, Campbell, and get a load of scrap, metal mainly, no iron, because couldn't take iron back, and he'd take it back, sort it out and sell it up. He travelled with a man called Sam Ibbs, Uncle Sam. Uncle Sam married Aunt Laura, and when they first used to come down to Cornwall here, I got pictures of them staying in tents. They used to have bungalow tents back then, and they used to stop up a scurrier, and they used to get their bit of metal and take it back and come back down. As time went on, my grandfather, he had a hut built, a big old hut, and he had that over at Radnor. By this time, my father was about 17, 18. So they used to come down, get their bit of metal and go on back and come back down. But anyway, my grandfather decided that he wanted to stay down here. So, as I said, he had the hut built. They went from the bungalow tents then to the hut. And then he found a bit of ground over at a place called United Downs. It was all mining area, really. Mine deposits like mounds and dugouts, and I think the Americans used the United Downs in the war for digging holes and all sorts of stuff. Rumour had it that the mine shafts up there, when the Americans pulled out, the Yanks, they dumped everything down the mine shafts. And there is stuff down in the shafts up the back of United Downs. Anyway, my grandfather bought a little place called Heatherbank. It had a little wood chalet on it, and a bit of a yard there. So that's where they originate from being down here. And that's really where I was born there. and that place was called Heatherbank United Roads and Day. And my earliest memories, really, when I was a young boy, because I went everywhere with my granddad, my earliest memories of going up to Stan Phillips, up to Lost Williel, getting a lorry load of cosh wood, bringing it back and splitting it up. And my grandfather used to have rounds, firewood rounds, in Red Roof and on the council estates and that. And as a very young boy, me and a couple of other young chavvies, my same age, used to fill the log baskets up, and the Garys then would come along, pick them off the lorry and throw them into the house. So he had a good old fire log round, my grandfather, and he would buy a bit of metal if it was there as well. And then he also dealt in a lot of rags, which my mother loved that. Picking through the rags and woolens and sorting out anything that was any good. And anything that was any good was washed, put away, either sold or used. But then the rag was to put on a lorry then and took up to Morels. It was the rag buyers. So that's the sort of thing that I first remember. And as time went on then, my grandfather started a scrap yard right there in Heatherbank. And there wasn't a lot of iron back then, to be honest. It was mostly metal. But then my father got in with a couple of big factories, and one was called Teagle's of Blackwater, or Mr. Tom Teagle. He was the boss, and then he had a son called Fred Teagle. They made farming machinery. He invented a lot of it. Very clever man, old Tom Teagle. But a real old, upright man that wouldn't tolerate or no messing at all. What it was, it was. But my father was in there, and then my grandfather took over Fred Teagle, and they had a factory in Tucker Mill, just outside of Camborne there. So that's when we started having the ironing. And in those days, the iron was took outside. A lot of it was profile sheets, but a lot of it was always pressings as well. Was put into what we called the pit. And years ago, what we used to have to do is reverse the lorry up alongside the pit. It was about just below sideboard height, and load it on the lorry, and Mr. Teagle used to come out, and he and my father used to have a bit of a deal, and that's the way it went on. So that was the start of it, and that is as far as I can remember. And gradually the logs died out, and the scrapyard took over, really. So moving on a little bit from that, I went with my grandfather most everywhere. But the hiccup really was, and although they wouldn't have it to be, and I wouldn't want to tell a lie on anybody, because what I'm telling people here and now, I can put my hand on my heart and swear on the Holy Bible that it's my version of the truth. So, some of the Ware family, they didn't like my mother. She was a real gypsy, and they didn't like her, but they could never get over her because she was too strong a woman, very upright and forthright woman. So that was the start of the animosity that I can remember. Now, we pulled on my grandfather's, when I say we, I was only a baby. We pulled on my grandfather's yard in 1960, exactly when I was born. I got the photographs that I'll put up in a minute of the trailer. We was in a 22-foot trailer. But this time, my grandfather moved into the big old hut that was there. Again, I got photographs of that. So as time went on, my grandfather and father fought out a little bit along the way, and they had a bit of ups and downs, but they always ended up back together. And it was, sometimes it's pretty heated there. Like I said, my mother wouldn't be put upon by anybody. So when it was, as I was growing up, Tommy Ware, that's my father's next brother down the line, he went and served his time as a plumber. So he had nothing to do with scrap business or anything like it whatsoever. He was a plumber. Then my father's youngest brother, Harry Ware, he worked out Crofty Mine. So that was that. Now on my mother's side, Richards's, gypsy people, they come from Port Isaac. And my grandfather, Fred Richards, was a very well respected fighting man. Not that he was looking for trouble, because all he wanted to do really was have a good old drink and a good old play on his piano accordion and a good old sing-song. But anyway, they lived down at a place called Rough Street down Lanner. That's my earliest recollection of it. First of all, they lived down the bottom of Rough Street, in beside the chute. And they lived in a bus there. And unfortunately, it was Christmas Eve. I think it's 1959. But I could be wrong with that date. But if I'm wrong, I'm sorry. Christmas Eve, my grandfather had a fatal accident. Fred Richards, he come down over the hill, Rough Street Hill, put his foot on the brake of whatever he was driving, and the brakes failed, and he ran straight into the wall. And as far as I'm aware, he put the steering wheel through his chest. So that was something that was absolutely terrible. Broke my granny's jaw in several places. Apparently she was wired up. Obviously I wasn't born at that time, but that's a little bit of background about that. And the thing about my mum's family was she was one of 22, but 17 survived. So it's a very, very big family, but devastation at that time for the whole family. So my granny moved up the road a little bit, up on the left-hand side going up Rough Street. And up there she had a trailer, a wood hut, and a luton top, which she raised them up in, the younger ones that were still at home. I think down beside where she lived, Uncle Freddie stopped there with Aunt Sissy and his family. I remember a fellow there called Larry Nebo. He was used to go out with me Aunt Kathleen a little bit. But there was the times there. I used to stay down with my granny's, and we all slept in the same bed, head to toe. And I used to sleep with the gals then. Kind of a little funny story, really. My Aunt Kathleen had a bit of a web foot, like 2 toes on her 1 foot, and she always used to put that foot up around you, like, you know, trashing you when you was a boy. But anyway, they were still good times. And I've been down in that old hut there nearly all night with me mother's brother, Samson, Uncle Samson. He would strip a motorbike down or whatever he had, put them back together, and yeah, it was good old times down there. But hard times for me granny though, for what she endured, the amount of children she had, and then losing my grandfather. But the gals and the boys obviously all rallied around her, and she went on from that. But every weekend or even midweek, my mother would be down seeing her mother, and it was good memories. Uncle Joey lived a bit further up the road, on top of the hill up there. There's another tragedy behind that one, when he lost his wife. That's further on down in the story. But going back to where I lived, at Etherbank, it is important for everybody to know at this point in the story, I knew nothing else. That's where I was born. And I was raised up really within the Ware family. And I was the oldest grandson, so obviously I went, when my grandfather went anywhere, I went with him, if I was allowed. Sometimes I wasn't allowed, and sometimes that would cause a rouse. But it's important that you understand that's where I was born and raised. And then as the story goes on and unfolds, you'll see why it's particularly significant. And then it went on then, where I got me knowledge, is what I call it. And I used to go calling with my grandfather. We'd jump in his transit, and by then, obviously, they were settled. We used to go to Newquay a lot. Back in the days, Newquay was full of plumbers. And that's where I got my knowledge from. It was one little tale I'll tell you right now. One thing he did. He always had a collar and tie when he went calling. And a notebook, a ready reckoner, and a scales. We drive up to Newquay. We had to go around the back streets, because every back street had a garage. And like I said, it was loaded with plumbers. Anyway, we would go down the back streets, and my grandfather would see a garage door open. He'd pull up in his lorry. Get out. Morning, sir. I'm on the lookout for a bit of scrap if there's anything about. And the plumber would normally say, no, I got some scrap here, but I takes it in myself. My grandfather said, well, I'll pay you the same money here and now. Weigh it in front of you. Save you taking it in. The plumber would normally say, well, that's fair enough. Let's get it sorted. So my grandfather used to carry like a little slip knot, piece of string with him. Normally the stuff was in bags back then, SCM bags. So he used to grab hold of the bag, tie a knot in the top, if he could, and put the slip knot on. And he put the scales on the bag, and he'd say to the plumber, right, you hold the pen and paper, look at the weight, and write it down. And then we'll add it up at the end, and I'll pay you up. So my grandfather would catch up the scales he had back then. The whole inside of the scales used to come down. So he would grab hold the scales like that in his hands. Say to the mush, he'd say, hook it on. And he hooked he'd hook it on. And my grandfather would lift the bag, as the plumber thought, off the floor. Now he was dead intent, the plumber would be, looking at the scales. never looking at nothing else, looking at the dial. So my grandfather would be rocking to him all the time, chatting to him, right, boss, have a look at that weight, blah, blah, blah. Got it? Down on the floor with the bag. Now, what the plumber didn't realise was he was that intent looking at the dial of the scales. The bag never left the floor. To all intents and purposes, my grandfather could judge. He would judge it like to say, I don't know, it might be half on the weight in that bag or 3/4 on the weight or whatever it was. He could judge it. And the old plumber would write it down. But I can assure you the bag never left the floor. And that was his way in. Once he got there once or twice, they didn't even bother. They just told him to weigh it up and pay him up. But by the time we got home that day, we never had much iron. It was normally all metals. But by the time we got home that day, he had himself 2 or 3 underweight for Nix's, like, you know. And that's what I'm talking about knowledge. And he never would give up. He would talk to the man until they accepted what he said. So that he taught me all of that, really. At that time then, my mother got took really bad. This is about 1965. Really bad. Hemorrhaging from her mouth. Rushed into the hospital. And really, they didn't give her a lot of hope. Until she saw a specialist who told her at the time this was like new technology, that she could have a replacement valve put in her heart. Now, my mother is the only person I've ever known in my life who was not afraid to die. She believed in the Lord so much that she would pass her troubles over to the Lord and put herself in His hands many times. And that's the truth. God straight me dead, as I'm sitting here telling you. So she had to go to Royal Brompton Hospital in London. I was only 5-year-old. So she had this plastic valve put in her heart, which meant she couldn't sustain any more children anyway. That's how I was the only one. So she was a sick woman but even though she was sick, because she got strong and well again, she wouldn't take no crap, no shit, no way. And this plastic valve she had put in her heart, it was like technology that nobody have heard of before. So she went on for years, really, but I had to be careful about what she done. But she went on very, very well. So at that time, we was living in a trailer at the yard at Etterbank, 22-foot trailer. So my father's other sister, Clarice, my Aunt Clarice, she was living back there as well. But there was a little green hut, another green hut in the yard. And I think my Aunt Clarice stayed in that one for a while, because that's the place that we ended up with eventually. But yeah, that was that. And obviously from that time on, my father loved my mother anyway. He doted on her, really. And she wouldn't take no junk. So I'm going to take a little break right here and now. But this story, I promise you, you won't believe how it all ends up. So that's a little bit about the background of that. And there's more to come of that era, yes. But that's the start. So thank you very much if you've listened to this. And it's goodbye for now from the Romany Ride. Thank you.